Hello and welcome to The Closing Track, the official podcast of another Ascending Lark where music and the Christian worldview collides, and because of the lag, that headshot you just made doesn't actually count.
Rage quit.
Rage quit. Especially if you are playing any Call of Duty game where, just my personal experience, like the proportion of rage quit is like unbelievably high.
Well, if you think about most of the people playing Call of Duty, it's mostly like 8 and 9 year olds who get angry very easily.
Although I freely admit that back in my Halo days, I did have some moments where I raged quit because, playing PC lag works a little bit differently than it does console gaming.
Yeah.
But no, those moments where you make this glorious headshot and you see it hit, and you're like, hey, I should have gotten something from that. I should have gotten a medal. Or, even the game-winning kill. Those are the worst, when you have the game-winning kill headshot.
And instead they kill you because of the lag?
Yeah, instead you're the one that ends up dead because of the lag. It's like, what kind of, rigged system is this? It's bad. At least, though, lag on, MMOs or, Civ lag. I mean, that's not as bad.
The lags on MMOs, it doesn't really matter as much as first-person shooter where it's more of a real-time fighting than the sort of sped-up turn-based of MMOs. But, it still can affect in MMOs, but first-person shooters are definitely the worst when it comes to lag.
Yeah. Thank goodness that this is not a first-person shooter. Otherwise, that would just be really weird.
Yes, it would be. Very
My name is Austin. I'm the head honcho of this shindig. I keep running out of things to introduce myself, so across from me I have...
I'm Brett. I'm the other dude involved in the Ascending Lark, and as I've pointed out multiple times, I have a glorious beard.
You do, but as we just learned in this mission trip training that we attended after church, culture in India, they see beards differently, and I don't know if they might make you trim it up a little bit.
I don't know. It might help me sort of blend in better. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, one of the main religions in India is Sikhism, and one tenet of Sikhism is that men can't cut their hair or their beards. So if you ever see pictures of the standard guy with a turban and a massive beard, that's a Sikh.
Yeah, and just in society in general, the people I know who are from India or have, an Indian heritage, usually have some of the best mustaches ever. I'm not gonna lie. I've done, with my line of work, I have had to serve and be around Indian families, and fascinating every time. But I will always admire their mustaches, because their mustaches are awesome.
Yeah, I will give you that. I have seen pictures. I haven't really encountered that many Indian people, but seen pictures, and the people I have seen in person do have amazing mustaches.
Yeah, back in the day, I had several of them, just of the various places I had to visit for work. Yeah, and we're looking forward to possibly going on that trip, and like I suggested earlier, a worldwide The Closing Track episode.
That would be interesting.
That would be totes legit.
Broadcasting from Punjab, India.
Broadcasting from a place where cell service is non-existent.
Yay!
All right, we have quite the show lined up. We're going to talk about an article that we were going to talk about last week before we went on this giant rant about Lecrae and his new album. But before we do that, I need to address something.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so on Monday, for those of you that are, who like the Facebook page, we more or less came back online Monday. And I had planned out and, got everything set up in Hootsuite and all the other places to coordinate the launch, whatever. And I was going to boost the post. You can do that in Facebook, where if you post something on a page, you can, drop $5, $20, whatever, and expand the target audience that the post would receive. And I was going to do that for the post that, kind of kicked us on back online and talked about the closing track, what we're doing, Basically, this is the welcome back post. First mistake. Note to self. Facebook really, really wants you to pay $40 for every time you do this. I left the page to verify my PayPal account, and when it redirected me back to the page, I clicked confirm, just because I was in a hurry, so quick, that I didn't realize and see that it changed my option back to $40 after I put it at $5.
Yeah.
Well, that's not even the worst of it. Yeah, and so thankfully they didn't end up charging me like actually $40. They only charged me based on it reached $25 worth of people, so they only charged me $25. Okay.
Oh, that's actually really cool if they do that.
But but the post got served to several thousand people. The only problem was the link in that post was broken, and there was no way for me to change it.
But you did comment there with the unbroken link.
I know, but still, it's just like, okay, first of all, Facebook wants me to pay more money than I'm willing to pay. Two, if you're going to put a link for something like this, make sure the link works.
Yeah.
And then I tried to change it and it wouldn't let me, and I couldn't cancel the ad. And so that's not necessarily a correction, but it certainly is a goof. So we will, if we have goofs, as we will probably have, later on down the road,
Most definitely.
we will talk about the goofs, and you are free to laugh at us and facepalm with us and share in our temporary first world problem grief.
Although I did notice that for a while there after the post, we did have several new likes on our Facebook page, so that's a good thing.
That we did, and I don't deny that, it got some good things from it, but still, I'm just like, this is never, ever going to be repeated again. This is not going to happen ever again. But if you want to contact us, you can like that Facebook page where we post random things throughout the week. We talk about things. We share articles and videos and things like that. And that is, Facebook page is Another Ascending Lark. Our Twitter handle is @AALblog. And then if you want to email us, that is anotherascendinglark@gmail.com. If you want to have us discuss a topic on the show or want to... Man, I keep running out of things to fill this segment. I don't want to recycle all of the random things you can do to email us, but I keep running out of them.
Well, I mean, if this is the only episode they've heard, then it's nice to sort of cycle back through it.
If you are a fan of government conspiracies, we definitely want to hear from you.
Absolutely. Especially if it involves aliens.
Yes, if it involves aliens, especially, boy, we will hear anything you have to say, and we will totally dispute it, and we will suggest that you go get psychiatric evaluation. Not really, but...
Not really, yeah.
But, you get the drift. All right, so news. Not much in the way of news this week. We're not going to go too much into the news, only because A, it was a pretty slow week, and two, we actually have 5 albums on the platter to dissect and break down today.
Woo-woo.
So we're not going to take as much time on the news this time. And actually, the one story we are going to talk about, the 2 stories we are going to talk about are pretty related to each other. So for those of you who are tired of Frozen, and I'm tired of it, and I haven't even seen it.
Frozen's a great movie. You totes need to see it.
I bet I do need to see it, but I'm just tired of it. Like, I don't know why. I'm just tired of Frozen.
Yeah, to each his own. If you watch the movie, you might recant that, but we'll see.
We'll see. I mean, it's not like I haven't heard, 20 billion people talk about it to basically know what happens in the movie. And
okay, fair enough.
But anyway, so after 39 straight weeks in the Billboard top 10, Frozen finally leaves that area. Still in the Billboard 200, still at the top 200, but after 39 weeks in the top 10.
That's freaking impressive.
Holy crap.
But it is understandable given that Frozen is the top selling animated movie of all time.
Oh yeah, it broke an unbelievable amount of records. It was like when I was doing my FM90 stint earlier this year. I would have a Frozen related article to talk about on the radio each week, because it's like every single week Frozen broke some sort of new record. It's like, oh, remember how I talked about last week about how Frozen broke this one record? Yeah, this week they just broke the next record that they could have broken, and next week they'll probably do the same thing. But the album has sold 3.4 million copies since the film dropped in November 2013. Holy crap.
Yeah.
It hasn't sold fewer than 23,000 units in a week, which that's incredible. That's remarkable. And is also the top selling album for 2014, 3.1 million units sold so far.
Dang.
Yeah. That's kind of ridiculously high. So my theory is that the Frozen soundtrack is going to become the next American Online, startup CD that, back in the 90s everybody had a copy of because it was everywhere. You remember those?
Yeah, I remember those.
Yeah, oh my gosh, that's what this is going to come to. And then the other news article is kind of related to the same thing. Lecrae, #1 on the Billboard Top 200.
Heck yeah.
Hell yeah.
And again, for those who thought that a gospel-centered musician couldn't sell in the secular market, yeah.
Yeah. Lecrae is the 5th artist to have achieved both #1 on the Billboard Top 200 and on the gospel chart. Previous winners in that category include Chris Tomlin and his album Burning Lights, Toby Mac and his album I On It, Leanne Rimes' You Light Up My Life, and Bob Carlyle's Butterfly Kisses, which, if we were honest, nobody is surprised by that.
Not at all.
Like, oh my gosh, like I was in a wedding a couple weeks ago, and the bride walked down to the Butterfly Kisses, and it's like, oh my gosh, my childhood is like coming back to me because I haven't heard that song since I was a kid, but yet I still know every single word of it.
Dang.
Yeah. I was actually quite the Bob Carlyle fan when I was a kid. I actually did karaoke to one of his songs once.
That sounds horrifying, and I'm going to search as high and low as I can to find a video of that.
Oh, no, this wasn't videoed.
So you think.
Oh no, this wasn't videoed. I promise this wasn't videoed. But no, it's unknown how long Lecrae is going to stay top #1. I doubt he's going to stay another week. That's just my personal guess. But it's possible that he will remain in the top 10 for at least another 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah, and this is a success story not only for Lecrae, but for all of the people that have worked alongside Lecrae. I mean, keep in mind, Carrie Job had a song on the album. Andy Mineo had a song on the album.
For King and Country.
For King and Country had a song on that album, and their contribution to that album was actually I was kind of surprised to see them on there, but every single guest contribution on that album was solid, much better than some of the previous album works. But we could go into another rant about Lecrae, but we're going to shut up about Lecrae because we talked about him all last episode, which you can find in iTunes, or you can subscribe at theclosingtrack.podbean.com for all you Android users because you don't want to buy an iPhone.
Well, only because Galaxies are much better.
We're not having this discussion right now. But no, we have 5 albums up for consideration. Brett's got 2. I've got 3. I'm going to get started with mine, and then I'll hand it over to Brett because I'm curious to see what Brett's comments on the 2 albums that he took initiative to listen to and was willing to review. I listened to For King and Country's album, Run Wild, Live Free, Love Strong, and this was a really interesting album because it's easy to write them off as just being another Christian pop band, but they break just enough rules and just enough of the right ways to make that label a little bit unjustified. Especially on this album, their second album, that's definitely not a sophomore slump by any means. It's a very good follow-up to their first album, which the name of that album is escaping me. I believe it was called Crave. There are radio primed cuts on here, and most of the songs actually on here are pretty radio friendly, but the songwriting, their melody construction, their use of scripture in various places sets them apart from the rest of their peers. I think American Songwriter once dubbed them as Australia's answer to Coldplay. And for this album, sonically, that's pretty dang accurate. It doesn't sound like some of Coldplay's more recent stuff, but you can definitely hear a little bit of a Coldplay vibe and several other similar sounding bands in here. Fix My Eyes, I don't know if that's on the radio, but I have a feeling that's probably going to be their first radio hit. Wasn't really a fan of that song. But their 5th song on this album is called Shoulders. Anytime I'm listening to an album, I'm usually committed like, okay, listen to everything through once. On occasion, though, there's that song that comes up, and you're so blown away by it that you have to stop and go back to listen to it again. And that was Shoulders. I don't know if they have plans to get that on the radio, but my gosh, that song needs to get on the radio. That is an excellent adaptation of a psalm. It's not quoting the psalm verbatim, but the melody of the chorus, the verses, the song is incredible. If I were leading worship anywhere at the moment, which I'm not, I would immediately be incorporating that song now. There's also a ballad featuring Courtney, and that's all I have. That's just the credits on the album is Courtney, called Without You. And that collaboration needs to happen again yesterday, because I was pretty moved by the beauty of that song. And even some of the other songs that have got a little bit of a more poppy light rocky feel to it. It doesn't feel, it feels familiar, but it doesn't feel so familiar that you can immediately classify them with a bunch of other bands. And that's, I think, is their biggest strength, is that they know they know the playbook for Christian pop, and they know the areas where they can break it, get away with it, and make it sound unique. And it's got a pretty good sound appeal to it as well. Obviously I'm a metalhead. We've covered pretty much at least like 2 metal albums every episode.
We discussed Behemoth on the last episode, so
yeah. So we're metalheads, but I love this album. I'm definitely have enjoyed listening to this album throughout the week. So if you have written off for King and Country based off of their radio stuff, I would encourage you to not do that with this album and at least give it one spin. I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised. Brett, what you got?
Austin, do you remember Good Charlotte?
Of course I remember Good Charlotte.
Yes, everyone who was a teenager in the 2000s remembers Good Charlotte. Punk band, got a lot of attention, massively successful, and deservingly so. And as most Good Charlotte fans will probably know, the band was mainly led by Joel and Benji Madden, twin brothers, Joel on lead vocals, Benji on lead guitar and backup vocals. And after their album Cardiology, Good Charlotte called it quits, mainly I think due to what I've personally dubbed the drummer's curse, where a band just goes through so many drummers. Like, I don't know how many drummers Good Charlotte went through, but it was quite a bit.
That's like the problem here in Amarillo is, like, I know 20 billion guitarists and keyboards and vocalists, but I don't know a single drummer. And I'm jealous of bands that have that problem.
And if it tells you how bad it is, like, before their first album release, their drummer quit. Like, they recorded it and their drummer quit.
That sucks.
Yeah. But now, Joel and Benji Madden are back in a band called the Madden Brothers, and they are no longer singing punk music. Now it is folk rock.
Heck yeah.
Which, at first, I'm like, what the heck? This is such a weird change. And if you see their official picture for the Madden Brothers, they look completely different. They have very normal haircuts, sort of normal clothing, and they even have most of their tattoos covered up in it, which was definitely a surprise for me. But it was the Madden Brothers, it was them. I've been a huge fan of them, so I just had to give it a listen, and I was pleasantly surprised. It was a very, very good album. And one thing in particular I noted right off the bat, you can tell that the singer definitely is Joel Madden, but he's lost sort of the punk accent. Those of you who listen to a lot of punk could easily discern what the punk singing accent is. It's almost as distinctive as the country singing accent, and that's completely gone. He now has a more standardized singing voice, which is still really good. He definitely hasn't lost any of his chops. And this album was interesting in that it had 2 different discs. The first disc had 8 songs, and I believe the second disc had 7 songs. And each of them sort of exist as a work of their own. The first one has Dear Jane intro, and then the song Dear Jane. Second one, California Rain intro, and then California Rain. And the first disc seemed to be more upbeat, while the second one seemed to be at a sort of slower pace. And there wasn't a single bad song on this album. I liked all of them. I generally preferred the first disc over the second one, although, I mean, we're all going to have our preferences. And specifically, the 2 songs that I really, really liked were Brixton and Out of My Mind, both from the first disc. And it is just amazing to see these 2 performing music in such a vastly different style than they had been. I mean, if I hadn't been told that these were Joel and Benji Madden who were the main frontrunners of it, I probably would not have guessed it, even though, Joel's voice is pretty distinctive. I might have eventually figured it out, but
it's still not something you would expect anyway for a band like Good Charlotte and its 2 key members to go to quite the drastic genre jump.
Yeah, although, I mean, they might have just decided to sort of jump on a folk bandwagon because folk has been getting really big lately, and I mean, maybe they did the same thing with Good Charlotte, jumped on the punk bandwagon, but either way, they were very successful. And when Good Charlotte called it quits, I was saddened by it, but I understood. But I'm really happy to see that they're back and making music, and definitely the Madden Brothers album Greetings from California is definitely an album worth listening to. The only thing that really bothered me about the album is it's called Greetings from California, but you see the cover and it's sort of a moon stylized as someone jumping off a diving board, and you see Earth down below, but you see Florida down below. So I don't understand why they did that, but
That's a pretty significant oversight.
I mean, maybe they did it on purpose for the irony, but it's still a cool cover and still a good album and definitely worth listening to.
Well, sweet. Next album I listened to was one I was excited about for a while. The progressive metal band The Contortionists have released their third album called Language, and this was the one that I listened to probably the most this past week, only because of how complicated it is. If you are a music theory nerd or a prog nerd, or really even if you're a fan of delay pedals, how about I just say that? If you're a fan of delay pedals, you need to listen to this. Very, very, very atmospheric, very ethereal, very mystical sounding, even though it is a progressive metal album. And there are screams in the album. The screaming, when contrasted to both the amount and the sound of the clean, proggy moments, it is a beautiful, beautiful contrast. The opening song is called The Source. It will be on a commercial near you. And if it's not, people are stupid, because that's a song that belongs on a commercial for some, I don't know, environmental advocacy group, or, you know, you get the drift where I'm going.
That's unusual to say about a song.
Well, you could probably make it work for a lot of things, but if I were to imagine in my head, that's what it would be used for. And then it's not a very long album either, which, you know, is kind of ironic for most progressive metal albums, because most progressive metal albums, the intro to the first song is like 55 minutes on average. Now, I'm exaggerating, of course, but
yeah.
No, the rest of the album contrasts the gent sounding screams and growls and distorted moments with the clean, very experimental guitar keyboard combinations that really make you think. The only thing about this album that I don't like, and this isn't a criticism per se, but it's not an album that you can really put on in the background and just listen to. It's just the kind of album that you're going to want to sit down, turn your mind on, and like really interact with it as you hear it, because of how many things you can pick up and how many things you can get out of it. That's not something you can really do nowadays, but this album is both mixed well, produced well, and just flat out written well, that you have to give it your full attention when listening to it. And it's rewarding when you do. I mean, every time I have just sat down to listen to it, I've been really, I've walked away from it just calmed, soothed. I mean, I don't necessarily think that the emotional response to an album is a good criteria for judging it, but this album will make you feel calm and peaceful, even in the moments when they're getting a little chugga going on with a little bit of death growling.
That's really weird to hear from a prog metal band.
It's a very unusual prog metal album. It's gotten a lot of praise, which, I mean, I was going to listen to it even before I saw all the praise that came from it. But it's gotten a lot of praise for its creativity, for the way that it bends sort of genre convictions and how they push themselves. Their first album is, you know, critically hailed to be a gent standard, so to speak, on how to do like a gent in a way that's not, you know, strictly like Periphery or other sounding bands where you just, you know, grab yourself an H string and just chugga and whatever the lowest drop you can go. But Primordial Sound has this really, really nerdy line that's repeated multiple times with very minor changes to it. That's the thing, is that they will repeat certain lines, but they'll just make the smallest change of it. And it's a small enough change, but it's so precise and so intelligent to change the whole entire riff and change the way you hear it. And then Ebb and Flow and the Parable, which are the two songs that close the album out. When the climaxes for these songs arise, like you are listening. You can't turn away from it once these climaxes hit. These are very aggressive, relatively speaking, of course, and very engaging with how they approach it, and very well done all the way throughout. If you're a prog metal fan, or even if you're not a prog metal fan, or a metal fan for that matter, this is an album that you're going to want to listen to, only because it. Yes, there are screaming in it. Yeah, there are screams in it, but the screams are done in probably one of the most unique ways I think I've heard for an album like this. So yeah, check it out if that is something that interests you. Brett, what's the other album that you were going to talk about?
The other album is an album by Slash, which, if you don't know who Slash is, then,
Shame on you.
Yes, you've been living.
Shame on you.
You've been living under a rock.
Or you didn't
for
play.
several years.
Or you didn't play Guitar Hero 3.
Yeah, but I was actually surprised to see this on the list of new releases because for some reason I thought that this album was going to come out for a few more weeks. But the album is called World on Fire. It is the second album that Slash has done with Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators. And, I mean, the first album definitely was impressive for sure. I was surprised to see that it was a Slash album and not Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators featuring Slash. But granted, Slash is a much bigger figure than the Conspirators are.
Yeah.
But the first track on World on Fire is also called World on Fire. It's been playing on the radio for quite some time now. And it's one of your standard fast-paced, epic anthem rock songs. But it is still really good. I mean, as typical of a song it still has very creative elements, and of course Slash's guitar riffs are never old, never boring. And the second song on the album is probably my favorite. It's called Shadow Life. I listened to that one multiple times during this listen just because, my gosh, I mean, Miles Kennedy reached some pretty good high notes. He starts off with some really low notes. It's very diverse. He really shows off his voice in it. And the subject matter was very different than what you would expect from a lot of different albums of this genre. It was very anti-sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
That's kind of surprising.
Yeah, it really is, especially given that Slash is in it.
You know, of Guns N' Roses, who is not necessarily known for having the cleanest image ever.
Exactly, which, I mean, part of that might be just because maybe Slash has a more mature outlook on the world. Maybe Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators.
He's an old man now.
Yeah, maybe the other band does as well. But, I mean, even still, that was a shock to hear. And, my gosh, it's one of the best written songs I've heard in a while. And then the other song on this album that really caught my eye was Beneath the Savage Sun. It starts off really slow, very rough. The image I got in my mind was a WWE wrestler walking out to it, and he's this sort of big, hulking guy walking slowly, very intimidating. But then eventually it does speed up, and Miles Kennedy sings in a cleaner voice than the rough, sort of rugged style he had in the beginning. So, I mean, definitely some good shifts in the song. But as a whole, just like with the Madden Brothers, there wasn't a single song on this album that wasn't good, which usually you find at least one song in every album that is sort of meh, but not in this case. And, I mean, of course, Slash being in it, there are definitely primarily classic rock elements to it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Does it sound like Slash's work back from his Guns N' Roses days, or does it sound as if Slash has taken on his own persona and has changed up the sound that everybody associates him with?
I mean, sort of both. I mean, he definitely is still Slash. He definitely still has his style, and Miles Kennedy's voice does definitely work for the classic rock genre, but listening to it, it also has some very proggy elements to it.
Like the length.
Yeah, like the length. The length, it's 17 songs long, and
it was like, what, 75 minutes long?
It's like just under 73 minutes long. So, I mean, this was an epic.
That's prog metal territory right there.
Yeah, this was an epic that had to tackle. I mean, still definitely good to listen to. I mean, if you're on a long road trip or something, you could probably easily listen to this album straight through. But what really surprised me is that in some of the later songs, it sort of started dipping into Southern rock territory.
Ooh.
I mean,
I like you, Southern Rocky.
yeah, for sure. And you wouldn't think that classic rock, prog metal, and Southern rock together would sound that appealing, but it really does. They really do make it work. And I do have to warn some of those listening that there is some language in the album. There are some mildly sexual themes in the album, but it's not so much that it sort of deters from the overall quality of it.
Are there any particular songs that had that more than others that you
Well,
remember?
World on Fire dropped one F-bomb. I don't think there were any other F-bombs in the song.
Oh, that's a great way to start an album.
And Shadow Life, it did have some milder sexual themes, but also it's anti-sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So
yeah.
got to kind of balance that out. And of course, the song entitled "Dirty Girl."
That's pretty self-obvious.
Yeah. If you listen to a song called "Dirty Girl" and don't think it might have sexual themes in it, then you're not paying it close enough attention.
You must have misread it because that's kind of obvious.
Yeah. And one thing that kind of impressed me about this album is that, I mean, it's all one disc, but if you listen to it, tracks 1 through 9, 9 being Beneath the Savage Sun, that sounds like a complete work by itself. Beneath the Savage Sun sounds like a very typical sort of slower, speeding up end track to an album. Then Withered Delilah, the song after Beneath the Savage Sun, sounds like an opening.
Is it possible that it is a 2-disc album, but because of Rhapsody, it only showed up as being 1 disc?
There might be a possibility of it, but at the same time, the Madden Brothers album showed up as 2 discs.
Okay.
So, I don't know. But either way, it definitely... I'm glad they put it there because, I mean, very few people can sit and listen to 17 songs straight through. So if what they decided was to sort of split it in half to where people could have a good stopping point in it, then good on them. If not, well, it worked out well anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's got the length to be a double album. I mean, 17 songs, that's, I mean, unless it's a hip-hop album, that's pretty good length for a double album territory. But no, just the samples of it that you were playing before we started recording. Would you say that there's a... I mean, I know we've talked a little bit about genres, but overall, would you classify this as being a hard rock record?
Yeah, generally I would call it hard rock. Yeah, there are proggy and southern rock elements to it, but overall it has at its core a hard rock element to it, and that's definitely the genre it lies in.
Well, cool. Yeah, I'm definitely... You played the samples of it for me earlier, and it's like, yeah, I want to listen to this.
Definitely. And when an artist like Slash comes out with something, you better pay attention to it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the biggest Guns N' Roses fan ever, but Slash has always been someone that I've at least had some, I don't know anyone who doesn't like Slash if they play guitar.
I don't think it's possible to dislike Slash.
Oh, I'm sure there are people that don't like him, but as far as because I'm playing guitar, whatever, I don't know of any guitarist that doesn't at least respect Slash, even if they don't necessarily go for his sound.
For sure, and in the first album he did with Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators, the song that really stuck out to me was Anastasia, which if you haven't listened to it, definitely give it a listen. And like half of that song was, him playing along with Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators, sort of playing along with him. But the second half of that was mainly instrumental, with Slash just having this really epic guitar solo for like a minute and a half.
That's what he should have done when he did the Superbowl a couple years ago. But no, the Black Eyed Keys, who I have no admiration for whatsoever, had to put on the worst Super Bowl show in recent memory. And
it can't be as bad as Beyonce's.
Beyonce's show wasn't bad. Beyonce's show had other problems, but the Black Eyed Keys show, technical failures were...
Black Eyed Peas, not Black Keys.
Yeah, Black Keys. Not Black Keys. Oh my gosh, if the Black Keys could play at the Super Bowl, that would be awesome.
I was about to say, I don't remember the Black Keys.
No, the Black Eyed
Keys.
That would actually be an awesome collaboration.
That would be pretty epic.
That would be a great collaboration. That needs to happen.
So if anyone involved in hiring people for the halftime show of the Super Bowl is listening, that needs to happen.
Like, even though Slash was on it, 3 or 4 years ago, bring him back.
For sure.
No, like the Black Eyed Peas and their terrible, terrible halftime show. Slash just randomly shows up from the middle of the stage, plays this guitar solo while what's her name just starts grinding on him, and it's
Fergie.
like, yeah, Fergie, and it's like, you people, I don't understand you. All you had to do was just let that man walk out on stage with his guitar and just play. And you would probably have the best-selling Super Bowl halftime show, like most watched halftime show ever.
Yeah, I could definitely see that for sure.
That probably wouldn't have happened.
Bruno Mars coupled with
Which I never got to see.
Red Hot Chili Peppers, that was a really good collaboration.
I didn't
so
get
good
to
on
see
them.
that, though. I'm still sad I couldn't see that. I heard it was really good, though.
There's a thing called YouTube.
I know there's this thing called YouTube. But, okay, one more album, and this one is not. We don't have all that much glowy praise for. Flyleaf. Flyleaf has their new album out called Between the Stars, and yeah, this was quite the release. I'm still trying to process how to approach it. For those of you who aren't in the know, Lacey Mosley, who was the staple of Flyleaf, for the past 10 years, is no longer in the band, and they have since replaced her with a vocalist named Kristen May, who's done some other work in the Christian scene. And right off the bat, throughout the album, she is definitely the highlight of it with her voice. She has some moments where she can kind of sound like Lacey Mosley, but she's also not trying to be a Lacey Mosley clone. For that, I give her a lot of props for that, because it would be really tempting, I imagine, to just try to keep the Lacey thing going and not necessarily let your unique personality show. And that's definitely not a problem with this album. If anything, that is part of what makes this album so troublesome. Right off the bat, you have "Set Me on Fire," which, as a critic online pointed out, title of the opening track for the prior Flyleaf album was called "Fire Fire." New album has a song called "Set Me on Fire." I wonder what the next album's first track is going to be about. It gets off to a real good start. I'm pretty sure that's their radio single that's playing around at the moment, has been playing out for some time now. Very interesting change for the sound of Flyleaf overall. People knew that the sound was going to change a little bit because they've been releasing stuff here and there the past couple of years, and there were early rumors suggesting that maybe they were trying to ride a Paramore vibe. The good news is that they are not trying to ride the Paramore vibe for the entire way through. There are moments here or there where you might be able to draw that out, but for the most part, it is a very pop rock-y album. And "Set Me on Fire" is one of the few moments where it even comes close to being a hard rock sound that Flyleaf has often been well known for. If you are thinking that maybe they were gonna go back to the first Flyleaf album, which is by far my least favorite, and try to recapture some of that aggressive hard rockness, this is like a watered down version of Memento Mori, which is Flyleaf's best album by far, and I will debate that to the end of time, that Memento Mori was Flyleaf's greatest accomplishment. Very safe musically, even though they flirt in a couple of places with trying to press themselves a little bit. There are a couple of songs that are not rock songs at all, that are overtly pop songs. Track number 11 is called "Blue Roses," which last night I went to visit my family, and my brother was there. And he hadn't listened to the album yet. And I said, "Here, see how long you can make it into this song." And he made it like 48 seconds before he couldn't take the pop anymore.
Yeah, that was kind of disappointing that came from Flyleaf.
Well, it was a good song, but I'm just like the song is good. Don't get me wrong, the song is good, but coming from Flyleaf, it's a little hard to swallow. And then the song before that starts as a Isley cover. I'm listening to this and I'm hearing the song and I'm like, oh, this is like Isley territory. And for those of you who aren't Isley fans, Isley is a very well-known indie pop rock band. And vocally, she sounds a little bit like Sherry Bemis, which, since Sherry Bemis is my favorite vocalist of all time, I've had my picture taken with her, and I kind of have a crush on her. That was a plus, until the middle of the song came around, where this scream comes out of nowhere. It sounds terrible, completely out of place, and is quite literally the worst scream I've ever heard in my life. Ruins an otherwise really slow, kind of reflective and contemplative indie rock vibe song.
Yeah, that just came from nowhere.
We listened to it on the way to church this morning, and
you can't help but wonder what the heck were they thinking? Why did they put a scream there?
yeah, I'm like, of all the songs on this album to put a scream on, why in the world would you pick that song to do it? Now that's not. No, those are the two songs that we've been pretty hard on. Marionette is probably going to be another radio release. It was a safe, but generally enjoyable hard rock song. The problem I have with this album is that it's not a bad album, but it's not a good one either. This is not the worst thing I've ever heard. In fact, I would honestly say that I enjoyed listening to it, but it's not something that I'm going to listen to, and it's very much longer. And the change for Flyleaf is a little bit too hard for me to swallow at the moment. I'm sure I'll get used to it, but the change right now is just a little bit too hard for me to swallow. There are several good moments on the album. Well of Lies has this really awesome organ intro that you wouldn't expect, but they pull off really well. Magnetic has a very, very good arrangement for the verses. If you're a Flyleaf fan, you've obviously heard this album by now. If you are someone who still thinks that Flyleaf is fronted by this short woman who has the voice of the devil, then you can rest assured that she's no longer a part of the picture, even though she was quite the outspoken believer and one to respect many, many non-Christian fans for her boldness of her faith. And did I ever tell you about the time I saw Flyleaf live with the Lazy Mosley lineup?
Actually, no, you didn't.
Okay, so this is back in 2009. I was living in Granbury at the time, and this was the most ridiculous lineup ever. It was just a one-day weekend festival, whatever. It was Sanctus Real, which really was the one I wanted to see at the time. Flyleaf, David Crowder, and Chris Tomlin with Carrie Job.
Okay, yeah, I do remember you telling me about that.
Okay, so we go there. I go there mainly for Sanctus Real. And their set got rained out, 3 songs in, which really bummed me. But when, the rain cleared, it was safe to come out, whatever. Flyleaf came on, and Flyleaf was the only band that was actually able to play their full set. And it was amazing how the crowd that for 3 songs was really getting in it with Sanctus Real, for the most part, is like stone cold silent. Because there is this woman on stage doing these screams, making these like demon possessed like vocal sounds while these guys wearing makeup and all black clothes are doing these stunts on a stage. And it was funny. Like, it was really, really funny. And then after the set was over, there was this mass exodus of all of these like punk hardcore emo kids just left the show because Flyleaf was done. They had no interest in watching David Crowder or Chris Tomlin. They came for Flyleaf, which, let's be honest, that's what they were trying to do, was they were trying to, hey, if they throw Flyleaf in, maybe they'll stay for the whole set. No, that's not going to work.
Yeah, if they were to do that, they should have just made Flyleaf the last act.
Yeah, which that would have been a pretty cool thing for the last act. But I can boast that I've seen the Lazy Mosley lineup of Flyleaf, and it was awesome. That's what really turned me on to Flyleaf. I had never really considered them before, but after seeing them live, really changed things. But no, Between the Stars by Flyleaf is not an album that I have too much praise for, but it's also not an album I can entirely just straight up criticize either. So if you have written off Flyleaf before, this might be the chance to jump back on board. If you are a Flyleaf fan, you're probably going to be a Flyleaf fan still and probably listen to it. The original trilogy of Flyleaf is done, so now we're probably entering prequel area.
That wasn't a reference of anything at all.
No, there was no subtle reference there at all. The only difference to that very, very bad reference being is that they actually have the capacity to like pull something off good. Then the next album will be...
Hey, the prequel of Star Wars was still generally good.
No.
Episode 3, come on.
We'll table this for the random lightning round. But no, they have the lineup to pull off something great, so check out their next album if this one didn't do it for you. I know I will. But no, so covering what we did For King of Countries, Love Wild, Live Free, Love Strong. Madden Brothers, what was the name of that album?
Greetings from California.
We did the Contortionists and their album Language. We did Slash.
World on Fire.
Yeah, World on Fire. And then Flyleaf's was Between the Stars. So yeah, that's what all came out this week. Next week, we got several interesting releases coming up. We have Leonard Cohen's Popular Problems. We have Disciples Attack, which I call dibs on. Remedy Drives Commodity, and then you can have this one. Stripers Live at the Whiskey CD DVD.
Still not sure how I feel about that, given their most recent installment.
They're gonna be go read the track list. Like, their track list is mostly classic stuff.
Okay, sweet. I might have to give that a listen to.
I mean, yeah, there's new stuff on there, which I didn't think that album was as bad as you made it out to be. Like, it wasn't as good as the covering or anything, but I didn't think it was as bad as you made it out to be.
Well, it was mainly just that I was very disappointed because
Okay, I'll grant you that.
Their album before was sort of a remix, re-recording of some of their classic hits, and it was really good, very excellent, sort of showcased sort of a new lower pitched sound for Striper. I was really excited to hear it in their next album, and the next album just didn't deliver.
Yeah, I understand that. We all have moments like that. But no, back to Star Wars. No. The prequels were not good. They weren't generally good at all.
Episode 1 had its bad moments, i.e., Kid Anakin and Jar Jar.
I actually didn't mind Kid Anakin as much. Like, that part really didn't bother me near as much.
He just wasn't that good of an actor at all.
He wasn't a good of an actor, but I think they needed, like, some innocent, like... The appeal to it for me was that there was this charming, innocent, like, Anakin Skywalker that is then contrasted in Episode 3 to be this, like, raging murderer Darth Vader. I mean...
Yeah.
I don't know.
I can kind of see, but... Okay, two big things that happened in the prequel that very much impacted Star Wars. First off, Darth Maul's double-bladed lightsaber
was awesome.
Okay, let's just think about this for a bit. Even in the expanded universe, the books and video games and stuff, no one had seen anything except for a single-bladed standard lightsaber.
Yes.
When Ray Park came to fill the role of Darth Maul, he requested a longer hilt lightsaber to sort of, better accommodate his style of stage fighting.
Right, which was beautiful to watch.
Instead, George Lucas decided, well, let's just give you a double-bladed lightsaber and, just sort of make something completely different.
And it worked.
Yes, and after that, there was the curved hilt lightsaber that Count Dooku used, and
which Christopher Lee's performance in both 2 and 3 was abysmal.
Well, I enjoyed it, actually.
I didn't.
But anyways, and led to the curved hilt, led to a lot of different styles of lightsabers that we see in the expanded universe too. And then you have Mace Windu's purple lightsaber.
Yes.
Now, before this, there had been one different colored lightsaber in the expanded universe, and that was Chewbacca's nephew had a bronze colored lightsaber when he was one of the few Wookie Jedi.
A Wookie Jedi having a bronze colored lightsaber. What a surprise.
Yeah. And, there was that, but, that was just a single-use difference. But since there was the added purple lightsaber that Samuel L. Jackson himself requested, after that, the video games, the books and everything, they have multiple colored lightsabers besides the standard green, blue, and red.
Okay, here's my thing. I'm not denying that the prequels, like, expanded the universe in the ways that were beneficial. My beef is that as movies, they sucked. That's solely my beef with it, is that when it came to, like, the execution of it being a movie, then it sucked. I love some of the things that happened in the prequels, but the way that they were portrayed as happening, not a fan of.
Episode 1, yeah, I can definitely understand. Episode 1 was probably my least favorite. Episode 2, yeah, had...
Episode 2 was awful. I refused to watch Episode 2.
I liked it generally, but yeah, it had its bad moments. Didn't think it was as bad as Episode 1, but Episode 3 was phenomenal.
Episode 3 ended it on a good note. I'm not going to deny that.
Except for the whole Anakin, you're breaking my heart line. That was really
was a problem. Well, that was a problem with the whole prequels anyway. The script writing for the prequels were generally terrible. Generally, it was pretty bad, and I think there were some lines in 3 that were worse.
Yeah, I'll give you that. The one thing that I recently found out that I wish would have kept, originally Jar Jar was intended to be a bounty hunter chasing after Qui-Gon Jinn instead of comic relief.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I would be really interested to see the movie where Jar Jar Binks is like a legit bounty hunter type person.
The image that's popping into my head is one that's hard to make sense. But
you're gonna die.
No comment. All right, let's get into the meat of this episode. So we were going to talk about an article last week before we had our rant on Lecrae, and I promised the guy who wrote the article, his name is J.W. Wartick, that we would cover it in this episode because we were going to talk about it in the last episode, but we didn't. The name of the article is called "Christian Discernment Regarding Music," and J.W. and I have been friends and colleagues with the Christian Apologetics Alliance for, well over 3 or 4 years now. He and I were in the Alliance back before there were 100 members in it. Now it's ballooned to, like, I want to say the last time I saw it was like 3,000 members or something like that.
Yeah, and the content has definitely fallen
Yeah,
downhill.
I don't participate as much in the Alliance anymore just because you see the same things over and over again. I still participate with the blog, which if President Spikes, if you are listening to this, I know I'm sorry. I'm still on hiatus. I'm sorry. I'm coming off of it soon. I just got to wait for some other back-end deals, shady things to work themselves out before I say I come back on. Okay, I'm coming back soon. But
That sounded really suspicious.
yeah, it was suspicious. But no, JW and I have known each other now for a while. He's a great guy, an apologist I really respect, even though we don't share eye to eye on everything. He is a very gracious apologist. He's passionate about defending the gospel. He's a very, very good conversational guy with anyone. Even when he disagrees with you, he's very polite. He's very respectful, and he's a great example of what it means to be an apologist. So if that is something that interests you, look up his stuff and just read his stuff. Even if you don't agree with it, I think you'll appreciate the way that he goes about things. He writes at JW Wartick. That's war and then tick, like the bug.com. And this post was one that he tagged me in, wanting me to give some, just read it and get some feedback, whatever. And it was an outstanding post talking about discernment when it comes to music, which nowadays, Brett, we don't. When it comes to discernment, it seems like we either have too much of it or we don't have enough of it at all.
Mainly, I see the not enough of it side, but I do see a bit of the too much.
Yeah, I definitely see instances where it is a little too much and it's overkill, but it's not. It's still something that I don't think we've necessarily fleshed out when it comes to us as Christians talking about music and applying theological topics to music. And so we're going to break this post down quite a bit and talk about what it said and give our comments on it. But first and foremost, before we even start talking about the article, this article demonstrates the benefit of having training in apologetics and how it impacts other areas of your life. I mean, I know you and I hear all the time that, apologetics is, ivory tower, heady, intellectual things that don't really have much practical relevance in real life. And this article demonstrates the exact opposite.
Definitely. I mean, you do see some of the ivory tower elements of it, but generally speaking,
it's accessible. It's accessible though. It's not this distant, elitist thing. It's very accessible.
Yeah, it mainly depends on which apologist you're talking to.
Oh, well, of course. I mean, JW is not an ivory tower apologist. At least I don't perceive him to be like that. He is a very down-to-earth, very practical, very, very relatable guy. But this post demonstrates that apologetics can benefit every area of the Christian walk, even areas that it doesn't think it matters. And when it comes to music, that was initially what Another Ascending Lark was going to be once we rebooted it in 2013, was linking music and apologetics. And we've since backed off on that a little bit, only just because my interest in the subject has taken a bit of a different direction. But it's still something that, was relevant in exploring. But the one thing that he asked me to was there anything he could have done differently, was the definition of music.
Yeah, that is kind of important.
Oh my gosh. You know how many conversations we get ourselves involved in where we're like, Christian music doesn't exist?
Oh yeah, a lot.
And they're like, but it does exist. And I'm like, what is the definition of music? And have you ever actually heard anyone been able to give a definition of music?
Not really. I have heard one person try to explain what Christian music was, but it was very bad and didn't really explain what music was at all.
In case you're listening for the first time, Brett and I hold the position that Christian music is a false category and doesn't technically exist.
Because while you can listen to various styles. You can say, oh, this is a metal riff. Oh, this is a blues riff. Oh, this is a country riff. There is no style. You can't have a riff that is Christian. You cannot play a G chord in a Christian style.
Yes, and to quote Switchfoot, Jesus didn't die for his music. Jesus died for him. Music can't choose to believe, to repent and believe, or walk away. And when it comes to the definition of music, that difference just comes out even more. Definition of music, one that I usually go to, is the art of arranging sounds in time so as to produce a continuous, unified, and emotional composition through melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. Brett, which one of those things will tell you about the gospel?
You can talk about the harmony of the four gospels.
I wasn't expecting you to do that, but I'm impressed. That's actually a pretty good response. But no, seriously, which one of those will tell you about the gospel?
None of them at all.
Yes,
for sure.
because Christianity is a propositional belief system. It proposes truths that are either true or false, and that there's no middle ground in between. Melody, harmony, rhythm, and the color of the tone. None of those things are proposing any truth. They are apropositional, to use the really, really big philosophy term. Now, Brett, what were to happen if we added lyrics to that definition? What would happen?
Nothing at all.
Oh, I beg to differ. Something would happen.
What do you mean?
Okay, let's say we added lyrics to the definition of music so that it was melody, harmony, rhythm, tone, color, and lyrics. What then becomes of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata?
Oh, I see what you mean. And, well, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata technically wouldn't be music.
Because it's missing one of the components that makes music music.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason why lyrics isn't often included in definitions of music, because as you are probably already aware of, you don't need lyrics or vocal work to have a song. Instrumentals are just as much music as any song that has lyrics or not in it. Which we go to that because one of the things that bothers the two of us is there's this false dichotomy that often gets set up between Christian music, and I say that with air quotes, and secular music.
Yeah, that definitely is a false dichotomy. You can't say that this song is Christian and this song is secular. There is no stylistic difference between the two with melody, harmony, rhythm, and timbre.
Now, you can call lyrics Christian. You can definitely call lyrics Christian, because what are lyrics, Mr. English Major?
Lyrics are words.
You're on a roll today.
Which, I mean, yeah, basically lyrics. There is the lyric style poem, which kind of differs from a lot of lyricked songs, but basically it's sort of a poetic way to get various points across.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a form of poetry, basically. Would I be right in that?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so it's a form of poetry. Is poetry music?
No.
Okay, so we can have Christian lyrics. Don't deny that for a second. But can we have Christian music? No. Now, there are those who will try to collapse the lyrics into the music because, I mean, let's be honest. When we think of music, when we think of songs that have lyrics in them, and so we lump the lyrics into that understanding of music. I mean, we both do that.
Yeah, but...
Just because we do that, though, doesn't make it right.
Yeah, but then there's also one quote-unquote Christian song I've heard a lot, especially on mission trips. I can't remember what it's called or who it's by, but it's basically this band playing the same rhythm over and over again, saying, oh, that's the entire thing. And like, this is such a great Christian song. You can feel the Spirit of God to sing. I'm like, they're saying, oh, that's not even a word.
Which is why we're talking about discernment. First of all, why as Christians do we need to practice discernment? First and foremost, as Christians, we need to be able to separate truth from error, which sadly goes without saying, but when it comes, especially like to worship songs, that seems to be sorely lacking nowadays, is discerning good theology in worship songs from bad theology in worship songs.
Like, I can't tell you how many times I've pointed out these lines or that verse or this entire song is not scripturally accurate at all. And people's like, come on. Just like sort of brushing it off. And I'm like, no, this isn't something to brush off. It's easier to remember lyrics from a song generally than like just straight up words on a page. And so if you're filling your mind and your memory with scripturally inaccurate lyrics, then that could very much damage your walk with Christ.
Yeah, I mean, there's intellectual discernment, and there's we discern because we're to be on the guard from the works of the flesh and the devil, which oftentimes I think when we talk about discernment, that's usually what we're talking about most of the time, is that we're discerning. Is this really from God? Well, kind of like what we talked about, kind of about what Pastor David talked about in church today when he talked about revival.
Yeah,
like defining revival, and contrasting it between like inauthentic revival, which in the Bible Belt we see it all the time.
Yeah, like this is a revival, which basically just means a series of nighttime worships throughout the week.
Yeah, and it satisfies our emotional quota, so to speak, and so we've believed that a revival is going on, which our emotional discernment is failing us here. We also discern to know and approve of what is good, and that's a pretty broad, that kind of collapses into the prior two things. But most importantly, and I think this one really is the biggest reason why we ought to do it, discernment is something that we do to glorify God because it requires us to love him with our minds and our hearts. A lack of discernment doesn't mean that you're not loving God with your heart or your mind in other areas in your life, but for something as essential to the Christian life as discernment, it's a serious thing that needs to change if you're not loving him with your heart and your mind in this way.
And I mean, the Bible specifically states in the Old and New Testaments that we're to love the Lord our God with all our heart, with all our souls, with all our minds, and with all our strength. How are we supposed to love the Lord our God with all our mind if we're not using our mind?
Yeah, discerning things isn't easy. Like, it requires you to do stuff. And when it comes to music, we don't want to discern it because either we haven't realized that our lives as Christians are entirely submitted to the lordship of Christ, or we just don't have the ability to discern at all. Which, going back to JW, apologetics is a means through which you can gain discernment, because through apologetics you usually learn critical thinking. I know some apologists that have no critical thinking skills whatsoever, but most other apologists I know have critical thinking skills, which critical thinking is the tool of discernment. And when it comes to why we ought to practice discernment concerning music, first and foremost, grace does not give us a license to sin. And discernment is the safeguard for Christian liberty when it comes to music. I actually have a portion of the Westminster Confession of Faith that I'm going to read out of. They who, upon the pretense of Christian liberty, practice any sin or cherish any lust, destroys the end of Christian liberty, which is that being delivered out of the hands of our enemies, we might serve the Lord without fear, in holiness and righteousness before him all of the days of our life. Amen. Gosh, I love the Westminster Confession of Faith. So beautiful, so simple, so straightforward. Pre-Reco, I recommend the Westminster Confession of Faith.
And then there's also the Baptist Confession of Faith that I definitely need to get a copy of.
Yes, confessions. But anyway, back to discernment. We both know people that they started listening to bands that they shouldn't have listened to. And then over time, as they let that band influence their life, it changed them in some way.
For sure, and I mean, I can even say that I've definitely fallen victim to this before.
Oh, I agree. Who really hasn't, in all honesty? But there's a point where it comes that you can still pull you still come out of this, so to speak, but it's a little too far gone. The influence has taken more control of you than you've realized. But music is such a profound source of influence in our lives, which, like you talked about earlier, when it comes to like bad worship songs, like this isn't something that is just isolated from our walk with Christ. We need to understand that the bands that we listen to, the songs that we listen to, everything we do as music lovers and musicians falls under the authority of God, who has given us great freedom to listen to styles that we want to listen to explore whatever creative tangent we happen to be on at the time, to seek creativity where it might be found. Because, let's be honest, who wants to listen to bad music anyway?
Me?
And I don't think, what?
Nah, no one wants to listen.
I wasn't expecting you to say no. I wasn't expecting you to say that.
Nah, no one I would say would want to listen to bad music, but I think that lately, especially in the Christian market, it seems like we've been just sort of make an analogy. We've been eating spam for so long, this canned ham byproduct sort of thing.
I hate spam so much.
And I mean, we've gotten just that's part of our diet. We've gotten so used to it that if we see a sirloin steak presented in front of us, we'll back away and say ew.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good way to put it. And whenever something comes along that is like the steak, we don't know how to deal with it. When discernment, like I said earlier, is the safeguard for us to have liberty. Which, if there's one thing that is a real kind of I think is about to become a real buzzworthy topic, it is the subject of Christian liberty. Because you and I have seen as of late plenty of posts, is it biblical for Christians to drink? Is it biblical for Christians to smoke? Or what about tattoos?
Yeah.
And with the rise of Reformed theology has also come the rise of the doctrine, the Reformed understanding of the doctrine of Christian liberty. And I think that that's going to become a real issue here soon. We need to understand discernment now because of the rise in the talks on Christian liberty. And we need to start applying that to music. Which the question comes, how do we apply that to music? It's not an easy question to answer. Like, it's not an easy thing to answer at all. The biggest thing I think has to be overcome is the secular Christian false dichotomy. Because in JW's article, he is talking about a comment that he made on another article, and which the original article that JW commented on said that when it comes to secular music, we discern based on the content of the lyrics. But when it comes to the Christian artist, we also discern based on their lives. Is that a justified dichotomy for us to hold?
Not at all. Especially if you look into some of the lifestyles of the quote-unquote Christian bands that have come out. I mean, there are some bands out there that generally love the Lord, that generally want to make music praising his name. Then there are those that are probably more into it because they have an easy music market that they know they can make money from.
Which the original article cited Tim on basis of As I Lay Dying, which As I Lay Dying is Exhibit A in that regard, because they abandoned their faith, a couple albums ago, but because of the scene that they were in, they kept milking it and kept writing it. And the biggest thing here is, like, I would agree to a certain extent that when it comes to Christian musicians, we ought to discern based on their lifestyles. Like, I don't think that on paper is a problem in of itself, but I don't think that we also should excuse secular artists of that same thing to a certain extent. But the biggest problem with that is we don't have access to their lives. I mean, we have access to, and he quotes, he cites like Vicky Beeching and Jennifer Knapp, who have publicly come out that they are practicing lesbians. Okay, well, that's a pretty obvious and practical example. But, like, let's just take Lecrae. We don't know what Lecrae did to the cashier at the gas station as he was traveling between two ring cities. We don't know what he said to the fan as he saw him, getting dinner before the show. We don't know all of these other details, and so to set a standard for discernment on the lives of the believers, as JW argues, is a pretty hard standard to hold.
And to an extent, it can also raise some artists on a pedestal, which, I mean, some of these artists that are being raised up, I mean, yes, they might be great Christian men and women, but it's almost sort of raising them to the point of they're flawless, if that makes any sense.
Oh, yeah. Which I think that's improving as of late. I think that recently we have been improving on that front as of late. But I really do think, and this is what JW says, and I agree with him fully, that when it comes to discernment, we have to look at the lyrics, which I freely admit is not something I personally want to do, because I will freely admit I like songs I probably shouldn't listen to. And I have been influenced by songs I probably shouldn't be influenced by, at least when it comes to the lyrical content of it. Can we separate the lyrics from the music, though? Because we hear all the time, oh, I don't listen to that band for their lyrics, I just listen for the music.
I honestly do think we can if you enter with, a guarded heart. Like, I've listened to Behemoth recently.
Yeah, you did. That's right.
Who they are very much Luciferian Satanists.
Oh, yeah.
But, I mean, their music's good. And, I mean, I could at that level, I could easily tune out the content of what it is they're singing about and just enjoy the music for yourself. Granted, that's sort of an extreme difference. I think it might be easier to discern on that level when it's so vastly different from your own
Yeah,
worldview.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is like that's an easy one because Behemoth, being a Luciferian band, well, that's just obvious that going into it that you're going to have to like really screen their lyrics. But I mean, let's take a worship band, so to speak, that's got some questionable phrases in their song. Not maybe doesn't pick up on the radar as much. Then it becomes a little bit harder. This is definitely a hard thing to answer, and I commend JW for the thoughtfulness in his answer. That when it comes to the sinner distinction, I mean, we associate with sinners all the time. I mean, the guy that looks, kind of like Jesus across from me is totally a sinner.
Kind of.
And so we should expect that musicians are going to sin. And then the other question that JW raised, and I think this is what the spirit of the original article was getting at: are songwriters necessarily teachers?
Not necessarily, no.
Not necessarily. And I think we set some artists to have a bunch of unexpected pressure because we go to them and we, whether consciously or not, we submit ourselves to them and learn from them. Gungor even raised that up. He said, look, we're not, like, our lyrics aren't meant to be instructing people per se. We're writing our songs, but we're not teachers. And that's an interesting way to look at it because people are taking it as if he's, like, teaching that, Adam and Noah were mythological and all the other things, that went on with that drama story. But when it comes to other people, when it comes to like worship songs, are worship leaders or worship songwriters, are they not teaching the congregation things about God?
They can be.
And that makes it all that much harder, is because we both know personal examples where that is true and where that is false. Personally, I'm one of the ones who, when leading worship, want to teach in the process of leading worship. That's how I do things. I don't see teaching as necessarily being separate from worship. But not all songwriters are like that. And it just makes this question all this much harder. I think just to close it out, because we're running definitely a little long, I'll quote JW, which you can go read this article at jwwartig.com. I'm going to quote this the closing of that article. All that to say that thus, I think for Christians, the best way to use discernment is to apply the truths of the Bible to the content of the music. We cannot realistically be expected to know the backgrounds of every individual who writes the music we may listen to or use in worship. And with the caveat noted above, I think the criterion simply should be the content, or the lyrics, of the music. How do we analyze the content? Well, there should be a number of factors, including God's revelation in Scripture, and the gift of conscience ought to be our guides. We didn't necessarily answer this question because we don't necessarily have the answers ourselves, but quite frankly, nobody's talking about this, and so we might as well start now.
For sure.
Yeah, we're at about a minute 15 right now.
Hour 15?
Yeah. I don't know why I said a minute. I'm tired. My starvation diet is like making me not think well today.
And we've been talking for an hour and 15 minutes about stuff like this. It can wear on you.
Well, I think I've had I want to say I've had 300 calories today.
That's not too bad. It's not that far in the day.
It's 3:15.
I've had less than that, I guarantee you.
You just had a beer. That's 500 calories right there.
Okay, fair enough.
Brett, you got any recommendations this week for our listeners? Anything you want to point them in the direction of?
Haven't really been looking into that much of stuff. The only thing I can think of off the top of my head is Nathaniel Hawthorne's a really good author. I've been reading a lot of his stuff for class recently, and he's got a lot of really good short stories, definitely from sort of a Puritan or sort of a pseudo-Puritan worldview, and definitely can contribute for sure to one's walk, how one sees various issues in the Christian world. So yeah, definitely, if you haven't read much of Nathaniel Hawthorne, get a hold of some of his short stories and read them.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I've never read anything of Nathaniel Hawthorne, but
Scarlet Letter.
Actually, no, I have not read the Scarlet Letter.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. That's kind of bad for me. I have a reco, and I also have a disreco. I'll get to the disreco first. I strongly disreco if you are calling out a pest control provider for a problem. If it's a problem inside your house, do not squish. if you can, do not squish and do not wipe up and dispose of whatever insects you're the problem of. I had to go to a customer's house earlier in the week, had ants in her kitchen. The only problem was she had already killed the ants with a homemade pesticide or whatever and wiped them up, which made it harder for me to identify the ants, figure out what kind of ants they are, and then figure out what trail they were going. So if you're going to call out a pest control provider for something, give them as much information, like visual information, as you can work with. Do not be amazed at how, if they're a good pest control provider, that they will be able to pick up on so many extra things just because they can see where these insects are at, especially ants. For the love of God, do not wash up ants when you find them. Leave them where they're at. Kill them if you want, but leave them where they're at. That can make the make or break difference between a successful treatment and not a successful treatment. And then I also, I already gave my other reco earlier in the show. It was the Westminster Confession of Faith. There's a version of the Westminster Confession of Faith that you can buy on Amazon for like, $16-17. Real small, compact, very nice cover, imitation leather, very small, fits, I think it's about the size of an Android phone, so to speak. And if you're not familiar with the Westminster Confession of Faith, even if you're not someone who call yourself a Calvinist or Reformed, a great article of the faith from old, and there's plenty of stuff to read and interact with, very meaty, very thought-provoking, and yeah, that's something I would recommend you to check out.
Awesome sauce.
That was really weak.
Yeah, it was. I don't know what happened to my voice.
I don't know what happened to your voice either. Next week's show, we normally don't do this, but next week's show, we are going to be talking about the movie Believe Me, which is coming out in theaters and will be available on iTunes on the same day, this coming Friday. Brett, while you were gone to the post office, I went ahead and pre-ordered the movie so we can watch it when it comes out.
Excellent.
So we will definitely be talking about that, and we'll still talk about music next week, whatever. But next week's show, we're going to be talking about Believe Me and Christian movies, because this movie has the potential to flip the entire genre around and really signal the new way for us as Christians to be doing movies. And I'm definitely excited for it. It's got an awesome cast. It has an awesome premise. Go to Facebook, look for the film on Facebook, and watch the trailer if you haven't already. And be prepared to be slightly offended because it is provocative, but that's all the more reason why this movie, I think, is so important.
Yeah, honestly, if I had watched this and didn't know that, people like Lecrae were in it.
Yeah, it's got Lecrae in it, for crying out loud.
If I didn't know that sort of a thing, I would have probably immediately been offended by it and thought that it was a movie meant to insult Christians.
It's not. It's made by a Christian studio, so when you're watching it and you're realizing, like, oh my gosh, this premise is terrible, it's made by a Christian studio. So don't write the premise of the movie off, which I'm not going to spoil for you because I want you to go and watch the trailer. Don't write the premise off because it's a controversial and provocative premise, but quite honestly, it's something we need to talk about. It's a genuine issue that has turned off many unbelievers from the church that I'm sure many unbelievers could probably testify to. And it's something that we need to look at that, hey, kind of ties back into discernment when we talked to, all the discernment talk earlier.
Woo woo.
Woo woo. It's amazing how these things all interconnect. So yeah, next week's show is on Believe Me, and we don't normally tease the subjects for next week's shows, but that one is for certain. Brett, thanks again for taking time out of your Sunday to talk nonsense with me.
No problem. Thank you for starting this whole thing up.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a lot of fun. I want to thank Apple for making the best software on the planet, for making the best phone on the planet.
Boo.
I also want to thank Rhapsody for the fact that they're the best streaming software that mankind currently has access to.
Yay.
I don't know what else I should say because I don't know if I want a boo or a yay from you. Okay. We also want to thank and praise God for the gospel that every day we are justified not in the things that we do. We are justified by the righteousness of the one who lived a perfect, sinless life and freely gave it for us so that way our peace with God might be made and that we might not be enemies and children of wrath who justly deserve his condemnation, but that what we might be adopted into his family as sons of the creator of the universe and entitled to all the rights and privileges of being that thereof, freely of his great and amazing grace, which covers sins so deep so stained that we think we are worthless, but God will point to his cross and say, I've already poured out that wrath for that sin on my son in your place. Oh man, gospel's great stuff. So, yes, I am Austin.
And I'm Brett.
And I am going to start playing the outro music on my iPhone.
Boo.
Oh, that's all you have to say is boo?
Galaxy for the win.
Nah. iPhones. This isn't the new iPhone. I want the new iPhone, but I don't have the money for it right now.
We'll get into this later.
We'll see y'all next week. Y'all have a great week.